The sound of her father's mahogany desk drawer sliding shut echoed through the cramped law office as Sarah Mitchell watched her siblings lean forward eagerly in their leather chairs. Attorney Robert Thornfield adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and cleared his throat, the rustling of documents filling the uncomfortable silence that had settled over the room like morning fog. Before you jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. As per the last will and testament of David Mitchell, Thornfield began, his voice carrying the weight of finality. The downtown commercial properties on Fifth Avenue will be divided equally between Marcus and Jennifer Mitchell. Sarah's older brother Marcus couldn't suppress the satisfied smile that crept across his face, while her sister Jennifer's manicured fingers drummed triumphantly against her designer purse. The attorney continued reading from the thick document. The family home on Maple Street, along with all furnishings and personal effects, is bequeathed to Jennifer Mitchell. Jennifer's smile widened as she exchanged a meaningful glance with Marcus. Sarah felt her chest tighten, knowing what was coming next. And finally, Thornfield's eyes found Sarah's across the polished conference table. The 47-acre plot of undeveloped land in Millbrook County, known locally as the Mitchell Tract, is left solely to Sarah Mitchell. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Sarah watched as Marcus rolled his eyes dramatically, and Jennifer let out what could only be described as a snort of derision. That godforsaken wasteland? Marcus leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. Dad always said he regretted buying that mess. Nothing but swamp, rocks, and scrub brush. The property taxes alone will eat her alive. His voice carried that familiar condescending tone that had defined their relationship since childhood. Jennifer's laugh was sharp and cutting. At least we got the valuable assets. Sarah can have fun with her mosquito paradise. She turned to face Sarah directly, her expression mixing pity with barely concealed smugness. Honestly, Sarah, you might want to consider selling it quickly before the county comes after you for back taxes. I heard Dad was behind on payments for that land. Sarah's throat felt dry as sandpaper. She had always known her father loved that property, despite what her siblings claimed. Every weekend of her childhood, he had driven out there, walking the boundaries with his surveyor's tools, talking about the potential he saw in those rolling hills. But now, sitting in this sterile office, surrounded by the scent of leather and old books, she wondered if perhaps her siblings were right. Before she could respond, Thornfield cleared his throat again. "There is one additional item," he said, reaching for another folder. Mr. Mitchell left a sealed envelope with specific instructions that it only be opened by Sarah, and only in the event that she accepts the inheritance of the Millbrook property. Marcus's eyebrows shot up. What kind of game is the old man playing from the grave? His voice carried an edge of irritation mixed with curiosity. Jennifer leaned forward, her interest clearly piqued despite her previous dismissal. What's in the envelope? Some kind of treasure map to make the swampland valuable? Her tone was mocking, but she caught the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. Sarah accepted the cream-colored envelope from Thornfield's outstretched hand. Her father's familiar handwriting spelled out her name in careful script across the front. The paper felt substantial between her fingers, and she could feel the weight of something more than just a letter inside. "I'll read it later," Sarah said quietly, tucking the envelope into her jacket pocket. The truth is, she wasn't sure she wanted to know what final words her father had left for her, especially after being left with what everyone considered the worthless portion of his estate. Marcus stood up abruptly, straightening his expensive suit jacket. "Well, this has been enlightening. Jennifer, we should discuss the commercial properties over lunch. There's a lot of paperwork to handle for the transfer." He looked down at Sarah with what might have been pity or satisfaction. "Sarah, good luck with your swamp. Try not to let the alligators get you." Jennifer gathered her things with practiced efficiency. "We'll need to schedule the house cleaning soon. I'm thinking of putting it on the market within the month. The staging company recommended clearing everything out first." She paused at the door, glancing back at Sarah. "You're welcome to take any of Dad's old junk if you want. I know you were always sentimental about his collections." The dismissal in her voice stung more than Sarah expected. Those collections were their father's lifetime of memories, his books on geology and surveying, his vintage maps and mineral samples. To Jennifer, they were simply obstacles to a quick sale. After her siblings left, Sarah remained seated in the quiet office, the envelope burning like a coal in her pocket. Thornfield busied himself organizing papers, giving her space to process what had just happened. Through the tall windows, she could see Marcus and Jennifer standing on the sidewalk, already deep in animated conversation about their windfall. "Your father spoke of you often," Thornfield said quietly, not looking up from his filing. "He was very proud of your work at the Geological Survey Office. Said you had inherited his eye for reading the land." Sarah worked as a junior geologist for the state, spending her days analyzing soil samples and ground surveys. It wasn't glamorous work, but she found satisfaction in understanding the stories that layers of earth could tell. Her father had encouraged this career path, even when her siblings questioned the wisdom of choosing a field that would never make her wealthy. "He never seemed proud of anything I did," Sarah replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Marcus got the business sense, Jennifer got the social skills, and I got the worthless patch of dirt." Thornfield finally looked up, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners. "Your father was a complicated man, but he wasn't foolish. He spent 40 years in construction and development. He understood land value better than most." The attorney's words carried weight that made Sarah look at him more carefully. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that David Mitchell didn't make careless decisions, especially about property. That envelope in your pocket might contain more than just sentimental words." Thornfield returned to his papers, but Sarah caught the meaningful look he gave her before turning away. The drive to her small apartment took her past the commercial district, where her siblings had just inherited prime real estate. The buildings were solid, profitable, and undeniably valuable. Marcus would have no trouble managing those properties, and Jennifer would handle the sale of the family home with her usual ruthless efficiency. But as Sarah turned onto the county road that would eventually lead toward Millbrook, she found herself thinking about all those childhood weekends spent tramping through the supposedly worthless land. Her father had known every creek bed, every rocky outcrop, every stand of old-growth trees. He had taught her to read topographical maps on that property, showing her how to identify different geological formations. Back in her apartment, Sarah made herself a cup of coffee and sat at her small kitchen table with the envelope. The seal was still intact, the paper slightly yellowed with age. Her father's handwriting on the front looked exactly as she remembered from grocery lists and birthday cards throughout her childhood. Inside, she found 3 items: a handwritten letter on her father's personal stationery, a small brass key, and what appeared to be a modern geological survey report, dated just 6 months before his death. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she unfolded the letter. "My dearest Sarah, if you are reading this, then the will has been read, and your siblings have likely made their feelings about your inheritance quite clear. I know they see."
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Millbrook property as worthless, and I have encouraged this perception for reasons that will become clear. Sarah paused in her reading, her coffee growing cold as confusion mixed with growing excitement. "You are the only one of my children who truly understands the value of land beyond its immediate monetary worth. You read the earth the way others read books, and you inherited your grandfather's gift for seeing potential where others see problems. The enclosed survey report was commissioned privately and conducted by the best geological team I could find. What they discovered will change everything." Sarah's heart began to pound as she set down the letter and picked up the survey report. The technical language was familiar from her work, but the implications of what she was reading made her stand up from the table and pace around her small kitchen. The report detailed extensive geological analysis of the Mitchell Tract, including ground-penetrating radar, soil composition studies, and something called seismic reflection mapping. But it was the final section that made Sarah sink back into her chair with a gasp. Preliminary findings indicate significant hydrocarbon deposits consistent with recoverable oil and natural gas reserves. Estimated reserve capacity suggests commercial viability pending further exploratory drilling. Recommend immediate consultation with petroleum extraction specialists. Sarah read the paragraph 3 times before the full meaning sank in. Her father's worthless swampland was sitting on top of what could be a substantial oil deposit. She turned back to his letter with shaking hands. I have kept this information confidential because I needed to ensure the land went to someone who would handle it responsibly. Marcus would sell to the first bidder without considering long-term implications. Jennifer would turn it into a spectacle for her social media followers. But you, Sarah, you understand that some discoveries require careful consideration. The letter continued with detailed instructions about the brass key, which opened a safe deposit box at First National Bank, containing additional survey documents, legal papers, and contact information for petroleum consultants her father had quietly vetted. I know your siblings' reaction to your inheritance has hurt you. Let them enjoy their sense of superiority for now. Soon enough, they will understand that the true value of land isn't always visible on the surface. Trust your instincts. Trust your education, and remember that patience often rewards those who wait for the right moment to act. Sarah spent the rest of the evening reading and rereading the survey report, cross-referencing the geological data with maps of the area. Her father's careful handwriting filled the margins of the documents with notes and observations that showed just how thoroughly he had researched the potential of his land. The next morning, Sarah called in sick to work and drove out to the Millbrook property for the first time since the funeral 3 weeks earlier. Standing at the rusted gate that marked the entrance to the tract, she tried to see the land through new eyes. What had always appeared to be random hills and valleys now revealed itself as a complex geological formation. The limestone outcroppings her father had shown her as a child suddenly made sense as indicators of the sedimentary layers that could trap oil and gas deposits. The marshy areas that Marcus had mocked weren't just wetlands. They were surface expressions of underground water systems that often accompanied hydrocarbon reserves. Sarah spent the morning walking the property boundaries, taking photographs, and making notes. For the first time since the will reading, she felt a sense of excitement rather than disappointment about her inheritance. Her siblings could keep their immediately profitable properties. She might be sitting on something far more valuable. But before she could act on the survey report's findings, Sarah knew she needed professional verification. The geological team her father had hired was reputable, but 6 months,
Enough time for conditions to change. She also needed to understand the legal implications of oil rights and mineral extraction before moving forward. Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah quietly consulted with geological experts from her state job, being careful not to reveal the specific location or her personal interest in the findings. She learned about leasing procedures, environmental impact assessments, and the complex negotiations that typically surrounded oil discovery on private land. Meanwhile, her siblings proceeded with their own inheritance plans exactly as expected. Marcus had already signed management contracts for the commercial properties and was projecting significant rental income increases. Jennifer had staged the family home and received multiple offers within days of listing. At Sunday family dinner at Jennifer's house, the conversation inevitably turned to Sarah's property situation. Marcus, emboldened by wine and his own recent success, became particularly vocal about what he saw as their father's final cruel joke. "I still can't believe Dad stuck you with that mess," he said, cutting into his steak with unnecessary force. "The property taxes alone are going to cost you more than you make in a month. And for what? A patch of unusable land that floods every spring?" Jennifer nodded sympathetically while serving herself more salad. "We've been thinking, Sarah, and we have a proposal. There's a local developer who might be willing to take the land off your hands for back taxes plus a small profit. It wouldn't be much, but at least you'd be free of the burden." Sarah looked up from her plate, studying her sister's face. Jennifer's expression was carefully neutral, but something in her eyes suggested this wasn't entirely altruistic concern. "What developer?" Sarah asked quietly. Marcus and Jennifer exchanged a quick glance before Marcus answered. "Someone Jennifer met through her real estate connections. He specializes in problem properties that other buyers won't touch. wetland reclamation, that sort of thing. The important thing is getting you out from under Dad's mistake before it ruins your credit, Jennifer added quickly. We're family, Sarah. We don't want to see you struggle with something that's clearly beyond your capabilities. The condescension in her sister's voice was unmistakable, but Sarah simply nodded and murmured something non-committal about considering their suggestion. She had no intention of selling the property, but she was beginning to understand that her siblings' sudden concern for her welfare might have motivations beyond simple family loyalty. That evening, Sarah made 2 important phone calls. The first was to the geological consulting firm that had prepared her father's report, arranging for updated testing to confirm their original findings. The second was to a lawyer who specialized in mineral rights and petroleum leasing agreements. The consultation with attorney Patricia Williams proved even more enlightening than Sarah had expected. Williams had handled dozens of cases involving unexpected oil discoveries on private property, and she immediately grasped the delicate nature of Sarah's situation. The key thing to understand, Williams explained over coffee in her downtown office, is that once word gets out about potential oil reserves, everything changes. Property values skyrocket, but so do the complications. You'll have petroleum companies, local developers, and potentially even government entities interested in your land. Sarah shared the details of her siblings' recent suggestion about selling to a developer, and William's expression grew serious. That's concerning. If someone already suspects what you're sitting on, they might be positioning themselves to acquire the property at below market value before you realize its true worth. Have you told anyone about your father's survey? No one except you, but I'm wondering if somehow word has gotten out anyway. Williams recommended extreme discretion until they could complete updated geological surveys and establish a clear legal framework for any future negotiations.
She also suggested that Sarah begin documenting any approaches from potential buyers, including the developer her siblings had mentioned. The updated geological survey took 3 weeks to complete, and the results exceeded even Sarah's most optimistic expectations. The consulting firm's report confirmed substantial oil and natural gas deposits beneath the Mitchell Tract, with estimated reserves that could generate millions of dollars in extraction revenue over the next 2 decades. Dr. Elizabeth Chen, the lead geologist on the project, met with Sarah to review the findings in detail. Your father chose this land well, whether he knew it at the time or not. The geological formations are ideal for hydrocarbon accumulation, and the deposit appears to be largely untapped. We're recommending immediate consultation with petroleum extraction companies. Sarah left the meeting with Dr. Chen feeling both exhilarated and overwhelmed. The property that had seemed like a burden just a month earlier was now revealed as potentially life-changing wealth. But she also understood that managing this discovery would require careful planning and absolute discretion. Unfortunately, discretion became impossible 3 days later when Sarah arrived at work to find Marcus waiting in the lobby of the State Geological Survey office. "We need to talk," he said without preamble, his usual joviality replaced by barely controlled anger. "I know what you're up to, Sarah, and it needs to stop immediately." Sarah's supervisor, Dr. Raymond Foster, emerged from the elevator at that moment and took in the tense scene between the siblings. "Is everything all right, Sarah?" "It's fine, Dr. Foster. My brother was just leaving." Sarah kept her voice level despite her racing heart. Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice, but not his intensity. "Don't play innocent. I know what you've been using state resources to conduct private surveys. That's fraud, Sarah, and it could cost you your job." Sarah's mind raced as she tried to understand how Marcus could have learned about her geological consultations. She had been scrupulously careful to separate her personal research from her work responsibilities, paying for all surveys and consultations with her own money and conducting them through independent firms. "I don't know what you're talking about, Marcus." "The hell you don't." Marcus's face was flushed with anger. "Jennifer's developer friend ran a preliminary survey of the area last week as part of his due diligence process. Imagine his surprise when he discovered evidence of recent, extensive geological testing on your property." Sarah felt a chill of understanding. Her siblings hadn't been trying to help her sell worthless land out of family concern. They had been working with someone who suspected the true value of the Mitchell Tract and wanted to acquire it before Sarah realized what she owned. Dr. Foster, clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation taking place in his lobby, stepped forward.
Perhaps this conversation should continue outside. Sarah, if you need to take some personal time to handle family matters, that can be arranged. Marcus seized on the opening. That's exactly what she needs, Dr. Foster. Sarah has been conducting unauthorized geological surveys using her position here to access equipment and expertise for personal gain. I think her employers should know about her ethical violations. The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. Sarah felt her professional reputation and personal integrity being attacked simultaneously, but she also recognized Marcus's desperation. If he was willing to make false accusations against her publicly, it meant he knew exactly how valuable the Mitchell Tract had become. "You're lying," Sarah said quietly, but her voice carried absolute conviction. "I have never used state resources for personal research. Every survey, every consultation, every document related to my father's property has been paid for privately and conducted through independent firms." Marcus's confidence wavered slightly, but he pressed forward. "Then how do you explain the extensive geological activity on your property? Professional survey teams don't work for free, Sarah."
You get the money for that kind of research? Dr. Foster's expression had shifted from discomfort to interest. As a geologist himself, he understood the cost and complexity of the kind of surveys Marcus was describing. "Sarah, what geological activity is your brother referring to?" Sarah found herself at a crossroads. She could continue to deflect and deny, risking her professional credibility while protecting her secret. Or she could reveal enough of the truth to defend herself while still maintaining some control over the situation. "Dr. Foster, my father left me some property in his will. As part of accepting that inheritance, I commissioned private geological surveys to understand what I had inherited. All work was paid for personally and conducted by independent firms with no connection to this office." Marcus's eyes widened as he realized Sarah was confirming the existence of professional geological work on the property. "What did those surveys find, Sarah?" "That's private information, Marcus. Just like the details of the commercial properties you inherited are private." Dr. Foster nodded approvingly. "Sarah is correct. Private geological surveys on personal property are entirely within her rights, and there's nothing unethical about commissioning professional analysis of inherited land. However," he turned to Marcus with a stern expression, "making false accusations about employee conduct is a serious matter." Marcus backed down quickly, realizing his attack had not only failed, but had actually confirmed for Sarah that her secret was already partially compromised. "I apologize, Dr. Foster. Family inheritance disputes can become emotional. I was concerned about my sister's financial situation and may have overreacted." After Marcus left, Dr. Foster lingered in the lobby with Sarah. "I don't know what's happening with your family property, but I want you to know that your work here has always been exemplary. If you need advice about geological matters related to your inheritance, I'm happy to help in an unofficial capacity." Sarah thanked him and went up to her office, but she couldn't concentrate on her routine work. Marcus's confrontation had revealed that somehow information about her geological surveys had reached the developer Jennifer had mentioned. That meant her window of discretion was closing rapidly. That afternoon, Sarah called attorney Patricia Williams to report the morning's events and discuss accelerated timelines for their legal preparations. "This changes everything," Williams said immediately. "If outside parties are already investigating your property, we need to move quickly to protect your interests. I'm recommending that we immediately file all necessary paperwork to establish your mineral rights and begin preliminary discussions with petroleum companies." Williams explained that Sarah had two primary options: lease the mineral extraction rights to an oil company for upfront payments plus ongoing royalties, or form a limited partnership to maintain greater control over the extraction process while sharing costs and profits. The leasing option is simpler and provides immediate income, but you'll have less control over how the extraction affects your land. A partnership approach is more complex, but could be significantly more profitable long-term if the reserves prove as substantial as your surveys suggest. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the decisions facing her, but she also understood that delay was no longer an option. "What do you recommend for someone in my situation?" "Given that you work in geology and understand the technical aspects better than most property owners, I'd suggest exploring the partnership option with a reputable petroleum company. But first, we need to lock down your legal position and make sure no one can challenge your ownership of the mineral rights. That evening, Sarah drove out to the Mitchell Tract one more time before the inevitable chaos of oil development transformed it forever. Standing on the small hill that provided the best view of the property, she tried to imagine how different her life would be in just a few months. The property had seemed like a burden was about to become a source of wealth that would dwarf anything her siblings had inherited. But more importantly, it would validate her father's faith in her judgment and her ability to see value where others saw only problems. As she walked back to her car, Sarah noticed fresh tire tracks in the muddy access road that led to the northern boundary of the property. Someone had been driving around her land recently, and given Marcus's morning confrontation, she suspected that wasn't casual visitors. Sarah called Williams from her car and reported the evidence of trespassing. The attorney's response was immediate and decisive. "We're filing for a temporary restraining order first thing tomorrow morning to prevent any unauthorized access to your property. If someone is conducting surveys or assessments without your permission, they're violating both property rights and potentially interfering with your mineral claims." The next morning brought an unexpected call that would change Sarah's timeline dramatically. Dr. Chen from the geological consulting firm phoned with urgent news. "Sarah, I need to inform you that we received an inquiry yesterday from a petroleum company asking about geological surveys in the Millbrook County area. They didn't specify your property directly, but they were clearly fishing for information about recent hydrocarbon assessments. I want you to know that we provided no information and referred them to contact property owners directly." Sarah's heart sank as she realized her secret was now completely compromised. Which company was it? Southwestern Petroleum Corporation. They're a mid-sized firm that specializes in acquiring drilling rights in emerging markets. The fact that they're already sniffing around suggests someone has been sharing information about your property's potential. After hanging up with Dr. Chen, Sarah immediately called Williams to report this latest development. "This confirms what we suspected," Williams said grimly. "Someone with access to information about your surveys has been talking to petroleum companies. We need to move into active negotiation mode immediately before Southwestern or another company approaches you with a lowball offer designed to take advantage of your inexperience." Williams had already compiled a list of reputable petroleum companies known for fair dealing with private landowners. She recommended that Sarah authorize her to begin preliminary discussions with 3 firms simultaneously, creating a competitive environment that would work in Sarah's favor. The key is controlling the narrative from the beginning. If we approach them as an informed seller with valuable property, we'll get much better terms than if we wait for them to approach us as desperate amateurs who stumbled onto something valuable. That afternoon, Sarah took a personal day and met Williams at the attorney's office to sign authorization papers and discuss negotiation strategy. As they worked through the details, Williams' secretary knocked and entered with an urgent message. "Ms. Mitchell, there's a gentleman in the lobby who says he represents Southwestern Petroleum Corporation. He's asking to speak with you about property in Millbrook County." Sarah and Williams exchanged meaningful looks. The game had begun, whether they were ready or not. "Send him in," Williams said, "but make it clear that any discussions will be conducted through legal representation." The man who entered Williams' office was exactly what Sarah expected from a petroleum company representative. Middle-aged, expensively dressed, and carrying the confident demeanor of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted through a combination of charm and pressure. "Ms. Mitchell, I'm Robert Kellerman from Southwestern Petroleum. I understand you've recently inherited some property that might be of interest to our company." Williams immediately took control of the conversation. "Mr. Kellerman, I'm Patricia Williams, Ms. Mitchell's attorney. Any discussions regarding the Mitchell Tract will be conducted through proper legal channels with full documentation." Kellerman's smile remained fixed, but Sarah caught the flicker of surprise in his eyes. He had clearly expected to find an unprepared property owner he could manipulate with technical jargon and pressure tactics. "Of course, counselor, I appreciate professionalism in these matters. I was hoping to discuss our preliminary offer for mineral extraction rights on Ms. Mitchell's property. Sarah had to admire the man's audacity. He was making an offer for rights on property that he officially had no information about, based on surveys he wasn't supposed to know existed. What makes you believe Ms. Mitchell's property has mineral extraction potential? Williams asked pointedly. Kellerman's pause lasted just a moment too long. Southwestern conducts routine geological assessments throughout this region. Millbrook County has shown promising indicators for hydrocarbon deposits. It was a plausible explanation that revealed nothing while implying everything. Sarah realized she was watching a master manipulator at work. Williams continued probing. And your preliminary offer is based on these routine regional assessments? That's correct. We'd be prepared to offer Ms. Mitchell a signing bonus of $50,000 plus a 12% royalty on any successful extraction, with a minimum annual payment of $10,000 whether we drill or not. Sarah's training in geological economics told her immediately that the offer was insultingly low. $50,000 might sound substantial to someone unfamiliar with petroleum extraction, but it was a fraction of what the property could be worth if the survey estimates proved accurate. Williams didn't respond immediately, instead making notes on a legal pad while Kellerman waited. The silence stretched uncomfortably until the petroleum representative felt compelled to fill it. Of course, that's just our opening position. We're always willing to negotiate with reasonable property owners who understand the mutual benefits of petroleum development. Mr. Kellerman, Williams said finally, Ms. Mitchell will consider your offer along with others she may receive. If Southwestern wishes to remain in consideration, we'll need complete details of your proposed terms, environmental impact assessments, and references from other property owners you've worked with in this region. Kellerman's confidence cracked slightly. Other offers? Has Ms. Mitchell been in discussions with other petroleum companies? Ms. Mitchell's business dealings are confidential, Williams replied smoothly, but I'm sure you understand that a property owner would be irresponsible not to explore all available options. After Kellerman left, Sarah slumped in her chair with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. Was that offer as insulting as it seemed? Worse, Williams said bluntly. Based on the reserve estimates in your geological surveys, a fair signing bonus would be at least 10 times what he offered, and the royalty percentage should be closer to 20%. He was trying to steal your property legally. Williams explained that Kellerman's approach confirmed their suspicions about information sharing. Southwestern had clearly obtained detailed knowledge about the Mitchell Tract's petroleum potential through unofficial channels, then attempted to exploit Sarah's presumed ignorance with a predatory offer. The good news is that we now know there's definitely competitive interest in your property. The bad news is that word is spreading faster than we hoped. We need to accelerate our timeline and get serious offers from reputable companies before the situation becomes a feeding frenzy. Over the next week, Williams contacted 3 petroleum companies with strong reputations for fair dealing with private landowners. The response was immediate and enthusiastic once the companies reviewed Sarah's geological surveys and confirmed the potential for significant hydrocarbon reserves. Mesa Energy Corporation, the first company to respond, sent a team of geologists to conduct their own assessment.
The property. Their preliminary findings confirmed and even exceeded Sarah's surveys, estimating potential reserves that could generate millions of dollars in extraction revenue over 15 to 20 years. Devin Hart, Mesa's chief negotiator, presented an offer that made Southwestern's proposal look even more insulting in comparison. Mesa was prepared to offer a signing bonus of $800,000, a 22% royalty on all extraction, and minimum annual payments of $100,000 regardless of production levels. But the most intriguing offer came from Continental Petroleum Partners, a company that specialized in forming limited partnerships with property owners rather than simply leasing mineral rights.
Continental's representative, Maria Santos, explained their approach during a meeting at Williams' office. Rather than purchasing your mineral rights, we propose forming a partnership where you retain 51% ownership of all petroleum extraction from your property. Continental would handle all technical aspects and operational costs, but you would maintain controlling interest and receive majority profits. Santos presented financial projections that were staggering. If the geological estimates proved accurate, Sarah's share of extraction profits could exceed $20 million over the life of the petroleum deposits. The partnership approach requires more involvement from you as the property owner, but it also provides much greater long-term financial returns. You'd need to understand and approve major decisions, but you'd also retain much more control over how your land is developed. Sarah found herself torn between the immediate security of Mesa's lease offer and the potentially massive long-term profits of Continental's partnership proposal. Both companies had excellent reputations, and their geological assessments confirmed that her father's property was indeed sitting on substantial petroleum reserves. While Sarah wrestled with the decision that would determine her financial future, her siblings remained completely unaware of the transformation taking place. Marcus continued managing his commercial properties with satisfaction, and Jennifer had successfully sold the family home for a substantial profit. But their ignorance was about to end in the most dramatic way possible. On a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after Kellerman's visit, Sarah received a call that would change everything. "Miss Mitchell, this is Janet Rodriguez from Channel 7 News. We're preparing a story about oil discovery in Millbrook County, and we understand you own property that's involved in the development. Would you be available for an interview?" Sarah's blood ran cold. "Where did you get that information?" "We received a tip about significant petroleum company activity in the area, and our research identified your property as the focus of multiple drilling rights negotiations. This is a major economic development story for our region." Sarah immediately called Williams, who arranged to meet the reporter and attempt to control the information being released. But by that afternoon, the story was already spreading through local media and online news sources. The headline in the Evening Herald read, "Local woman inherits $1 million oil discovery." The article detailed Sarah's inheritance of the Mitchell Tract and the competitive bidding between petroleum companies for drilling rights. Sarah's phone began ringing within hours of the story's publication. The first call came from Marcus, his voice a mixture of shock, anger, and barely controlled panic. The conversation that followed was one of the most difficult of Sarah's life, as she tried to explain the timeline of discovery while her siblings accused her of deliberate deception and manipulation. "Dad knew, didn't he?" Jennifer's voice came through the phone when Marcus handed it to her. "He planned this whole thing to make us look like fools while you got the real inheritance." "Jennifer, I had no idea about the oil when I inherited the property. I only found out because Dad left me a letter explaining what he had discovered." "A letter you conveniently forgot to mention during the will reading," Marcus's voice returned, thick with bitterness. "Do you have any idea what this means for the family? You're about to become a millionaire while we got pocket change in comparison." The conversation ended with accusations and recriminations that left Sarah emotionally drained. But it was only the beginning of the family crisis that would unfold over the following days. Jennifer called back that evening, her approach completely different from the morning's confrontation. Her voice was carefully controlled, almost businesslike in its calculated friendliness. "Sarah, I've been thinking about our conversation today, and I realize we all reacted emotionally to some shocking news. The important thing is that this is wonderful news for our family. We should be celebrating your good fortune." Sarah recognized the tone immediately. It was the voice Jennifer used when she wanted something, the same carefully modulated approach she had perfected for manipulating their parents throughout childhood. "I appreciate that, Jennifer. The thing is, we're still family, regardless of how Dad distributed his assets, and families should support each other through major life changes. I imagine managing petroleum development is going to be incredibly complex and stressful for someone without business experience." Sarah waited for the real purpose of the call, knowing it was coming. "Marcus and I have been discussing how we might be able to help you navigate the situation. Between his business management experience and my connections in real estate and development, we could form a family partnership to handle the oil extraction properly." There it was. Jennifer's solution to the problem of Sarah's unexpected windfall was to bring her siblings in as partners, effectively redistributing the inheritance to match what they believed they deserved. That's an interesting suggestion, Jennifer. What kind of partnership were you thinking about? Well, we were thinking that since we're all family and since we all inherited parts of Dad's estate, it might make sense to pool our resources. Marcus's commercial properties, the proceeds from the house sale, and your oil development all managed together for everyone's benefit. Sarah marveled at her sister's audacity. Jennifer was proposing that Sarah share her petroleum windfall in exchange for being included in the management of assets worth a fraction of the oil discovery's potential value. "I'll need to think about it," Sarah said carefully. "This is all very new to me." "Of course, take your time. But Sarah, I hope you'll remember that family is more important than money. We've always been there for each other, and that shouldn't change now that our financial situations are different." After hanging up, Sarah sat in her quiet apartment reflecting on the irony of Jennifer's words. When had her siblings ever been there for her? Throughout their childhood, Sarah had been the responsible one, the one who helped their father with his weekend projects, while Marcus played video games and Jennifer focused on her social life. During college, while Sarah worked 2 jobs to minimize her student loans, her siblings had full financial support from their parents without question. The next morning brought another surprise that would accelerate the family crisis beyond anything Sarah could have anticipated. Attorney Williams called with urgent news that sent Sarah's carefully managed situation
spiraling into chaos. "Sarah, we have a serious problem. Southwestern Petroleum filed a legal challenge to your mineral rights last night. They're claiming that your father's estate was improperly settled and that the mineral rights should have been distributed equally among all heirs." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face as she absorbed the implications. Can they do that? The will was very specific about the property distribution. They can file the challenge, but their legal standing is questionable at best. The concerning part is that someone with detailed knowledge of your family situation provided them with information to support their claim. They know about your siblings' inheritance, the timeline of the geological surveys, and even details about your father's financial situation before his death. Williams explained that Southwestern's legal strategy was based on arguing that David Mitchell had deliberately concealed the petroleum potential of the land to manipulate the inheritance distribution. If they could prove that he knew about the oil deposits when writing his will, they might be able to argue that the unequal distribution constituted fraud against the other heirs. The good news is that their argument has significant weaknesses. Your father's will was legally executed, and there's no requirement for equal distribution among heirs. The bad news is that this kind of challenge can tie up your mineral rights for months or even years while it works through the courts. Sarah realized immediately who had provided Southwestern with the detailed family information necessary for their legal challenge. Only Marcus and Jennifer had access to the specifics of their father's estate planning and the family dynamics that Southwestern was now using to build their case. My siblings are working with them, aren't they? Williams's pause confirmed Sarah's suspicion. Based on the information in their filing, it appears that someone very close to your family situation has been cooperating with Southwestern's legal team. The betrayal cut deeper than Sarah had expected. Her siblings weren't just trying to manipulate her into sharing her inheritance voluntarily. They were actively working with an outside company to steal her legal rights to the property their father had specifically left to her. That afternoon, Sarah received a call from Marcus that confirmed her worst fears about her siblings' involvement with Southwestern. "Sarah, we need to have a family meeting. This legal situation is getting out of hand, and we need to resolve it before it destroys all of us." "What legal situation, Marcus? The one you and Jennifer created by conspiring with Southwestern Petroleum?" Marcus's silence lasted long enough to confirm Sarah's accusation before he attempted to justify their actions. "We didn't conspire with anyone. When that lawyer contacted us about Dad's will, we simply answered their questions honestly. If there are irregularities in how the estate was handled, don't we have a responsibility to make sure everything was done properly?" Sarah marveled at her brother's ability to rationalize betrayal as righteousness. What lawyer, Marcus? Southwestern's attorney contacted you directly? Look, Sarah, this doesn't have to be adversarial. The lawyer explained that if Dad knew about the oil when he wrote his will, then legally the inheritance should be distributed differently. But we're family. We can work this out among ourselves without getting the courts involved. Sarah understood the trap her siblings were trying to set. They wanted her to agree to redistribute the inheritance voluntarily to avoid the legal challenge they had helped create. It was manipulation on a level that left her both impressed and disgusted by their calculated cruelty. Marcus, Dad left me that property specifically because he trusted me to handle it responsibly. If you and Jennifer want to challenge his will, that's your choice. But I won't be intimidated into giving up what he left me. Don't be stubborn about this, Sarah. Do you really want to spend years in court fighting your own family? Think about what Dad would have wanted for us. The hypocrisy.
Marcus invoking their father's wishes while actively working to overturn his explicit legal decisions was breathtaking. Sarah ended the call without responding to his emotional manipulation. Williams' strategy for dealing with Southwestern's legal challenge was aggressive and multifaceted. First, she filed a motion to dismiss based on the petroleum company's lack of standing to challenge a private estate settlement. Second, she requested discovery to determine exactly how Southwestern had obtained confidential information about the Mitchell family's private legal matters. If we can prove that Southwestern obtained privileged information through improper means, their entire challenge could be thrown out, Williams explained during an emergency strategy session. More importantly, if your siblings provided them with confidential estate information, they could face serious legal consequences themselves. The discovery process revealed the extent of Marcus and Jennifer's cooperation with Southwestern's legal team. Email records showed that Jennifer had contacted Southwestern immediately after the newspaper story broke, offering to provide information about the estate settlement in exchange for appropriate consideration for her and Marcus. The emails revealed a level of premeditation that shocked even Williams, who had handled numerous inheritance disputes. Your sister didn't just answer questions when contacted by Southwestern's lawyers, Williams reported after reviewing the discovery materials. She actively reached out to them with a proposal to challenge your inheritance. She even provided them with copies of estate documents and your father's medical records from his final illness. Sarah felt sick reading the email exchanges between Jennifer and Southwestern's legal team. Her sister had methodically provided every piece of information the petroleum company needed to build their challenge, including private family conversations and details about their father's mental state before his death. But the most damaging evidence against her siblings came from an unexpected source. Dr. Chen, the geologist who had conducted Sarah's updated surveys, contacted Williams with information that would destroy Southwestern's legal strategy. I thought you should know that Southwestern's legal team contacted our firm requesting copies of all geological work we've done in Millbrook County. When we refused to provide confidential client information, they offered to pay us substantial fees for any data that could help them assess the validity of petroleum claims in the area. Dr. Chen's testimony would prove that Southwestern had been actively seeking to acquire confidential geological information through improper means, potentially invalidating their entire legal challenge. Williams immediately filed additional motions based on this new evidence, arguing that Southwestern's challenge was based on illegally obtained information and should be dismissed with sanctions against both the petroleum company and the individuals who had provided them with confidential estate details. The legal proceedings took an unexpected turn when Judge Patricia Morrison, who was presiding over the inheritance challenge, ordered all parties to appear for a settlement conference. Judge Morrison had a reputation for cutting through complex legal arguments to focus on the underlying facts and fairness of disputed situations. Sarah found herself sitting across a conference table from Marcus and Jennifer for the first time since the newspaper story had broken. The tension in the room was palpable as both sides' attorneys prepared to present their positions. Judge Morrison began the conference by addressing Southwestern's representatives directly.
Counselor, I've reviewed the discovery materials in this case, and I'm troubled by how your client obtained the information supporting their challenge. Can you explain to me why Southwestern Petroleum has standing to challenge a private estate settlement? Southwestern's attorney, David Brennan, attempted to argue that their client had a legitimate business
Interest in ensuring that mineral rights were properly established before entering into extraction agreements. Judge Morrison's response was swift and decisive. That argument might have merit if your client had discovered irregularities through their own investigation, but the evidence shows that you actively solicited confidential estate information from individuals who may have had personal motivations for challenging the will. That raises serious questions about the legitimacy of your entire claim. The judge then turned her attention to Marcus and Jennifer, who had remained silent while their attorneys attempted to distance them from Southwestern's actions. Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, I want to understand your motivations for providing confidential estate information to a petroleum company. Did you believe you were acting in the best interests of your family? Jennifer's attorney attempted to answer for her, but Judge Morrison cut him off. I want to hear from your clients directly. This case involves family relationships and personal motivations that go beyond pure legal arguments. Jennifer's response revealed the depth of resentment that had been building since the inheritance distribution. Your Honor, we believed that our father's will was influenced by Sarah's manipulation during his final illness. She spent more time with him than we did, and she had access to his financial records and legal planning. Sarah listened in amazement as Jennifer essentially accused her of elder abuse and inheritance manipulation without any evidence beyond her own jealousy and greed. Marcus attempted to support his sister's claims, but only succeeded in making their position look worse. Sarah knew about geological surveys that our father had commissioned, but she never told us about them. If we had known the property had oil, we never would have agreed to the inheritance distribution. Judge Morrison's expression grew increasingly stern as she listened to Marcus and Jennifer's attempts to justify their actions. Let me make sure I understand your position. You're arguing that your father's will should be overturned because you didn't know the full value of the property you chose not to inherit? William seized the opening to present Sarah's perspective clearly and persuasively. Your Honor, Mr. Mitchell specifically chose to leave the Millbrook property to Sarah because he believed she would appreciate and properly manage it. The geological surveys were commissioned after he wrote his will, and Sarah only learned about them through a letter he left specifically for her. Williams presented the timeline of events, showing that David Mitchell had commissioned the geological surveys only months before his death, long after his will had been finalized. The surveys were conducted secretly, specifically because he wanted to ensure the property went to the child he believed would handle it responsibly. Sarah's father left her detailed instructions about how to handle the discovery of petroleum reserves because he trusted her judgment and her professional expertise in geology. Her siblings are essentially arguing that they should benefit from a decision they disagreed with simply because it turned out to be more valuable than they realized. Judge Morrison studied the evidence and legal arguments for several minutes before delivering a preliminary ruling that would reshape the entire case. Based on the evidence presented, I find no legal basis for challenging the validity of David Mitchell's will or the distribution of his estate. The will was properly executed, and there's no evidence that he lacked mental capacity or was subjected to undue influence during its creation. The judge's criticism of Southwestern's involvement was particularly harsh. More concerning is the petroleum company's role in this dispute. Southwestern appears to have actively encouraged family members to challenge a legal inheritance distribution for the company's own commercial benefit. That kind of interference in private family matters is inappropriate and potentially illegal. Judge Morrison ordered Southwestern to cease all legal challenges to Sarah's mineral rights and imposed financial sanctions for their improper interference in the estate settlement. She also ordered Marcus and Jennifer to pay Sarah's legal fees as compensation for the unfounded challenge to their father's will. But the judge's final comments were directed at the broader family situation that had created the legal dispute. This case represents a failure of family communication and mutual respect that has been exploited by outside commercial interests. While I can resolve the legal issues, the underlying family relationships will require attention that goes beyond what this court can provide. After the settlement conference, Sarah found herself alone with Marcus and Jennifer in the courthouse hallway. Their attorneys had departed to handle the paperwork related to Judge Morrison's ruling, leaving the siblings to face each other without legal buffers for the first time since the crisis began. Jennifer spoke first, her voice lacking its usual confident manipulation. "Sarah, I know you probably hate us right now, but we need to talk about what happens next." Sarah studied her sister's face, looking for genuine remorse, but finding only calculation and self-interest. "What happens next is that I move forward with developing the petroleum resources on my property, and you both live with the consequences of your choices." Marcus attempted to salvage something from the wreckage of their legal strategy. "Look, we made mistakes. We were emotional about Dad's death and the inheritance distribution. But we're still family, Sarah. This doesn't have to destroy our relationships permanently." Sarah recognized the familiar pattern of her siblings expecting forgiveness without acknowledging the full scope of their actions or showing genuine remorse for the harm they had caused. "Marcus, you and Jennifer didn't just disagree with Dad's will. You conspired with a petroleum company to steal property that he specifically left to me. You provided them with confidential family information and medical records to help them build a legal case against me. That goes beyond simple disagreement or emotional reactions." Jennifer's response revealed that she still didn't fully understand the severity of what they had done. "We were trying to protect the family's interests. If that property is worth millions of dollars, don't we deserve some consideration? We're Dad's children too." Sarah realized that her siblings genuinely believed they were entitled to share in her inheritance simply because it had turned out to be more valuable than expected. They couldn't accept that their father had made a deliberate choice to leave the property to the child he believed would handle it properly. "Jennifer, Dad could have left that property to all three of us if he wanted to. He chose to leave it specifically to me, along with instructions about how to handle petroleum development. You're not entitled to change his decision just because you don't like the results." The conversation ended without resolution, leaving Sarah to recognize that the legal victory had not repaired the fundamental damage to her family relationships. Her siblings had revealed themselves to be capable of betrayal and manipulation that went beyond normal inheritance disputes. Over the following weeks, Sarah proceeded with petroleum development negotiations while dealing with the ongoing aftermath of her family's legal challenge. Continental Petroleum's partnership proposal remained the most attractive option, offering her majority control over the extraction process while providing the technical expertise and capital necessary for development. Maria Santos from Continental proved to be both knowledgeable and trustworthy during the detailed negotiations that followed Judge Morrison's ruling. Continental's approach respected Sarah's desire to maintain environmental protections while maximizing the economic potential of the petroleum reserves. "Your property has some unique geological features that could make this one of the most efficient extraction sites we've worked with," Santos explained during a
Site visit to the Mitchell Tract. The reserve structure is ideal for horizontal drilling techniques that minimize surface disruption while accessing maximum petroleum deposits. Sarah appreciated Continental's commitment to environmental responsibility, particularly given her father's love for the natural features of the property. The partnership agreement included provisions for wildlife habitat protection, water quality monitoring, and restoration of disturbed areas after extraction was completed. The financial projections for the Continental Partnership exceeded even Sarah's most optimistic expectations. Based on updated geological assessments and current petroleum market conditions, her majority share of extraction profits could reach $30 million over the 20-year development timeline. But beyond the financial implications, Sarah found satisfaction in honoring her father's trust in her judgment and his belief that she would handle the property responsibly. Every decision about petroleum development was guided by his teachings about balancing economic opportunity with environmental stewardship. 3 months after Judge Morrison's ruling, Sarah signed the partnership agreement with Continental Petroleum, officially beginning the development process that would transform her life and validate her father's faith in her abilities. The signing ceremony took place at Williams' law office, with representatives from Continental, environmental consultants, and local government officials in attendance. As Sarah signed the final documents, she thought about her father's letter and his prediction that patience would reward those who waited for the right moment to act. Local media coverage of the partnership signing was extensive, focusing on the economic impact for the region and the innovative environmental protections included in the development plan. Sarah found herself portrayed as a responsible steward of natural resources who had successfully balanced economic development with environmental protection. The news coverage also highlighted the failed legal challenge from Southwestern Petroleum and the sanctions imposed by Judge Morrison. Marcus and Jennifer's role in the attempted theft of Sarah's inheritance became part of the public record, creating additional consequences for their actions beyond the legal penalties. Jennifer's real estate business suffered immediate damage from the negative publicity surrounding her attempt to manipulate her father's inheritance. Several clients canceled contracts after learning about her involvement with Southwestern's legal challenge, citing concerns about her professional ethics and integrity. Marcus faced similar consequences in his commercial property management business, with several tenant relationships becoming strained after news reports detailed his role in challenging his sister's inheritance. The publicity painted him as someone willing to betray family members for financial gain, undermining the trust essential to his business relationships. But the most significant consequence for both siblings was the realization that their actions had permanently damaged their relationship with Sarah and eliminated any possibility of sharing in her petroleum windfall through family reconciliation. Sarah received occasional messages from Marcus and Jennifer over the following months, usually timed to coincide with major milestones in the petroleum development process. Their communications followed a predictable pattern of attempted reconciliation, mixed with subtle suggestions that family loyalty should include financial sharing. Jennifer's approach remained the most manipulative, often focusing on their father's memory and what she claimed he would have wanted for the family's future. "Sarah, I know we've had our differences, but Dad always emphasized the importance of family unity. With all the success you're having with the oil development, I hope you'll consider ways to include Marcus and me in celebrating your good fortune. Family should share in each other's successes,
We share in each other's struggles." Sarah recognized the calculated nature of Jennifer's outreach, particularly the timing of her messages to coincide with news reports about petroleum development milestones. Her sister was still looking for ways to manipulate Sarah into sharing the wealth that her legal challenge had failed to steal. Marcus's approach was more direct, but equally transparent in its self-serving motivations. His messages typically focused on business opportunities and investment partnerships that would allow him to benefit from Sarah's petroleum income. "Sarah, I've been developing some commercial real estate projects that could benefit from the kind of capital investment that oil revenue could provide. Since we're family, I thought you might be interested in partnering with me on some development opportunities that could be profitable for both of us." Sarah understood that Marcus was essentially asking her to invest her petroleum profits in his business ventures, providing him with capital while allowing him to maintain the fiction that they were entering into legitimate business partnerships rather than charity arrangements. Neither sibling ever directly acknowledged the harm they had caused through their legal challenge or expressed genuine remorse for their attempts to steal her inheritance. Their messages consistently focused on moving forward and rebuilding family relationships without taking responsibility for the actions that had damaged those relationships. Sarah's response to these overtures was consistently polite but firm. She maintained minimal contact with her siblings while making it clear that their past actions had consequences that couldn't be simply overlooked in the interest of family harmony. Marcus, I appreciate your interest in maintaining family relationships, but trust is something that has to be rebuilt through actions, not just words. The legal challenge you and Jennifer supported caused significant damage that goes beyond simple disagreements about inheritance. The petroleum development process proceeded smoothly throughout the first year, with Continental's technical team successfully completing initial drilling and confirming the substantial nature of the hydrocarbon reserves. Sarah's decision to maintain majority control through the partnership structure proved wise as extraction revenues exceeded even the most optimistic projections. By the end of the first year of production, Sarah's share of petroleum profits had already reached $2 million, with projections for continued growth as additional wells came online. The financial security she had gained allowed her to make significant changes to her life, including purchasing a larger home, investing in additional real estate, and establishing a charitable foundation focused on environmental education. But perhaps more importantly, the success of the petroleum development validated her father's faith in her judgment and his decision to entrust her with the property that had been his greatest investment. Every milestone in the development process reminded Sarah of his teachings about patience, responsibility, and the importance of seeing potential where others saw only problems. The contrast between her financial growth and her siblings' continued struggles became increasingly stark as the petroleum development progressed. Jennifer's real estate business never fully recovered from the negative publicity surrounding the inheritance challenge, forcing her to accept smaller clients and less profitable transactions. Marcus's commercial property portfolio remained stable but showed none of the growth he had projected when first inheriting the Fifth Avenue properties. His inability to access additional capital for expansion meant that his real estate holdings remained static, while Sarah's wealth continued to multiply. The disparity in their financial situations created additional tensions in the already strained family relationships. Both Marcus and Jennifer found themselves in the position of watching their sister's wealth grow exponentially while their own financial situations remained woefully stagnant.
Remained limited by their earlier poor decisions. Sarah occasionally felt sympathy for her siblings' circumstances, but she also recognized that their current situations were direct consequences of choices they had made. Their decision to challenge her inheritance had not only failed to gain them access to petroleum profits, but had also damaged their professional reputations and business relationships. More importantly, their actions had revealed character flaws that went beyond simple greed or jealousy. Their willingness to conspire with an outside company to steal their sister's inheritance demonstrated a level of betrayal that Sarah found difficult to forgive or forget. The second year of petroleum development brought even greater financial returns as Continental's extraction operations reached full capacity. Sarah's annual income from petroleum royalties reached $5 million, placing her among the wealthiest individuals in the region and providing her with financial resources that exceeded anything she had previously imagined. The wealth also brought new challenges and responsibilities that required careful management and long-term planning. Sarah worked with financial advisors to develop investment strategies that would preserve and grow her petroleum income while also supporting charitable causes that reflected her father's values. The environmental foundation she established in her father's memory became a particular source of satisfaction, funding research into sustainable land use practices and supporting education programs that taught young people about environmental stewardship. The foundation's work honored her father's love of the land while using the profits from petroleum extraction to support environmental protection. Sarah also used her wealth to establish scholarship programs for students pursuing careers in geology and environmental science, creating opportunities for young people who shared her interest in understanding and protecting natural resources. The scholarships were designed specifically to support students from modest backgrounds who demonstrated both academic ability and genuine commitment to environmental protection. These charitable activities provided Sarah with a sense of purpose that went beyond personal financial gain, allowing her to use her unexpected wealth in ways that would have made her father proud. Every scholarship awarded and every environmental project funded represented a positive legacy that emerged from her father's careful planning
and trust in her judgment. The third year of petroleum development marked a significant milestone, as total extraction profits reached levels that established Sarah as one of the region's most successful entrepreneurs. Her story became a case study in responsible resource development and family inheritance planning, frequently cited in business schools and legal education programs. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. The Geological Society presented Sarah with an award for outstanding contributions to environmental stewardship in petroleum development, recognizing her insistence on environmental protections that exceeded industry standards. The award ceremony provided an opportunity for Sarah to reflect publicly on her father's influence and the lessons that had guided her decisions throughout the petroleum development process. My father taught me that true wealth comes not from extracting value from the land, but from understanding how to work with natural systems in ways that benefit both present and future generations, Sarah said in her acceptance speech. The success of this project reflects his wisdom and his faith in the importance of patience and responsible stewardship. The speech was widely reported in local and industry media, further cementing Sarah's reputation as a thoughtful and responsible developer who had successfully balanced economic success with environmental protection. Meanwhile, Marcus and Jennifer's financial situations continued to stagnate as they struggled with
long-term consequences of their failed legal challenge. Both siblings had been forced to accept that their actions had permanently eliminated any possibility of sharing in Sarah's petroleum wealth through family reconciliation. Jennifer's real estate business remained limited to smaller transactions, as her reputation for professional ethics remained damaged by the publicity surrounding the inheritance challenge. She had been forced to relocate to a smaller office and reduce her staff, accepting a significantly reduced standard of living compared to her previous expectations. Marcus faced similar limitations in his commercial property business, with several potential partners declining to work with him after learning about his role in challenging his sister's inheritance. The perception that he was willing to betray family members for financial gain made other business professionals reluctant to enter into partnerships that required trust and reliability. Both siblings occasionally reached out to Sarah with updated attempts at reconciliation, but their messages consistently revealed ongoing resentment about her success rather than genuine remorse for their actions. They seemed unable to accept that their current circumstances were consequences of their own choices rather than unfair treatment by their sister. Sarah's responses to these communications remained polite but distant, acknowledging their messages without encouraging further contact or suggesting any possibility of renewed family relationships. She had learned to recognize the patterns of manipulation and entitlement that characterized her siblings' approach to family relationships. The fourth year of petroleum development brought news that would complete Sarah's transformation from reluctant inheritor to successful entrepreneur. Continental's geological team announced the discovery of additional hydrocarbon reserves adjacent to the original Mitchell Tract, potentially doubling the long-term value of the petroleum development project. The new discoveries were located on land that Sarah had purchased using profits from the original petroleum extraction, demonstrating how her father's initial gift had multiplied through careful reinvestment and strategic planning. The additional reserves would extend the production timeline by at least 10 years and could increase total petroleum profits to over $50 million. Sarah's response to this news reflected the wisdom and patience her father had tried to instill in her throughout their relationship. Rather than rushing to exploit the new discoveries, she commissioned additional environmental studies to ensure that expanded extraction could be conducted without compromising the ecological integrity of the surrounding area. The measured approach to development expansion earned additional recognition from environmental groups and industry organizations, further establishing Sarah's reputation as a developer who prioritized long-term sustainability over short-term profits. As Sarah celebrated the 4th anniversary of her father's death, she found herself reflecting on the remarkable journey that had begun with what seemed like an unwanted inheritance of worthless swampland.
The property that Marcus and Jennifer had dismissed as a burden had become the foundation for wealth and success that exceeded anything their father could have imagined when he first purchased the land decades earlier. But more importantly, the experience had validated her father's belief in her character and judgment, proving that his decision to entrust her with the property had been based on accurate assessments of his children's values and capabilities. Every milestone in the petroleum development process had demonstrated the wisdom of his choice to leave the land to the child who would appreciate and protect it while maximizing its potential. The success story had come at the cost of family relationships that might never be repaired, but Sarah had learned to accept that some relationships cannot survive the revelation of fundamental character
differences. Her siblings had chosen greed and manipulation over family loyalty, and those choices had consequences that extended far beyond the failed legal challenge. As Sarah looked toward the future, she focused on using her wealth and success in ways that honored her father's memory and values, while creating positive impacts that would extend far beyond her own lifetime. The environmental foundation, scholarship programs, and sustainable development practices represented a legacy that transformed an inheritance of land into an inheritance of values and opportunities for future generations. 5 years after her father's death, Sarah stood on the observation deck of the new Environmental Research Center that had been built on the highest point of the Mitchell Tract. The facility represented the culmination of her vision for balancing petroleum extraction with environmental stewardship, housing laboratories, educational programs, and monitoring equipment that tracked the ecological impact of the ongoing development project. From this vantage point, she could see the carefully planned petroleum extraction sites scattered across the property, their operations so well integrated with the natural landscape that they appeared almost invisible from a distance. Continental's engineers had exceeded even their own expectations for environmentally sensitive development, creating extraction infrastructure that preserved wildlife corridors and protected sensitive wetland areas. The financial success of the project had surpassed every projection, with Sarah's total petroleum income now approaching $40 million as new reserves continued to come online. But the numbers that mattered most to her were the environmental metrics tracked by the research center, showing that wildlife populations on the property had actually increased since petroleum development began. Dr. Rachel Chen, the director of the Environmental Research Center, joined Sarah on the observation deck with the latest monitoring reports. The data showed thriving populations of migratory birds, improved water quality in the restored wetland areas, and successful regeneration of native plant species in areas that had been disturbed and then carefully restored. "Your father would be amazed by what this property has become," Dr. Chen remarked as they reviewed the ecological success indicators. "When we first started the environmental assessments, I never imagined we could achieve this level of biodiversity enhancement alongside petroleum extraction." Sarah smiled as she thought about her father's weekend walks across this same land, his dreams for what the property could become with proper stewardship and patience. The research center represented everything he had hoped for, a demonstration that economic development could enhance rather than diminish environmental value when guided by scientific understanding and long-term thinking. The success of the Mitchell Tract project had attracted national attention from both petroleum industry professionals and environmental organizations. Sarah found herself invited to speak at conferences and symposiums, sharing the innovative approaches that had made sustainable petroleum extraction possible on her property. These speaking engagements provided opportunities to promote the scholarship programs and environmental initiatives that had become central to her mission. Every presentation included information about educational opportunities for young people interested in careers that combined environmental protection with responsible resource development. The scholarship program had grown significantly over the past 5 years, supporting over 200 students pursuing degrees in geology, environmental science, and sustainable engineering. Many of these students completed internships at the research center, gaining hands-on experience with the monitoring and restoration techniques that made the Mitchell Tract project possible. Sarah took particular pride in the diversity of students supported by the scholarship program, with recipients representing communities that had historically been underrepresented in environmental and geological sciences. The program specifically targeted first-generation college students whose families had limited financial resources but demonstrated genuine commitment to environmental stewardship. One of the most successful scholarship recipients was Amy Rodriguez, a young woman from a farming family who had used her scholarship support to complete a degree in environmental engineering. Amy now worked as a project manager for Continental Petroleum, specializing in the sustainable development techniques pioneered at the Mitchell Tract. "Miss Mitchell, your scholarship didn't just pay for my education," Amy had told Sarah during a recent research center visit. "It showed me that environmental protection and economic development could work together when guided by the right values and scientific understanding." Amy's success story was repeated dozens of times among scholarship recipients who had used their education to pursue careers that balanced environmental responsibility with economic opportunity. These young professionals were already implementing sustainable development practices in projects across the region, multiplying the positive impact of Sarah's investment in education. The Environmental Foundation had also expanded its reach significantly, funding research projects at universities across the country and supporting policy initiatives that promoted sustainable resource development. The Foundation's grants had supported breakthrough research in restoration ecology, sustainable extraction techniques, and community-based environmental monitoring programs. Sarah's approach to philanthropy reflected the same patience and long-term thinking that had guided her petroleum development decisions. Rather than seeking immediate, visible impact, the Foundation invested in research and education initiatives that would create lasting change in how natural resources were understood and managed. The Foundation's most ambitious project was a comprehensive study of sustainable petroleum extraction techniques that could be applied to development projects throughout North America. The research, conducted in partnership with major universities and environmental organizations, used the Mitchell Tract as a model for demonstrating how traditional extraction practices could be modified to achieve both economic and environmental success. Meanwhile, the contrast between Sarah's success and her siblings' continued struggles had become even more pronounced as the years passed. Marcus had been forced to sell 2 of his commercial properties to cover debts accumulated during a failed expansion attempt, while Jennifer's real estate business had never recovered from the reputational damage caused by the inheritance challenge. Both siblings continued to reach out to Sarah periodically, their communications becoming increasingly desperate as their financial situations deteriorated. But their appeals for reconciliation continued to focus on their own needs, rather than acknowledging the harm they had caused or expressing genuine remorse for their actions. Jennifer's most recent message had arrived just before the 5th anniversary of their father's death, timed to coincide with news reports about the research center's opening ceremony. "Sarah, I've been watching the news coverage of your environmental center, and I'm so proud of what you've accomplished with Dad's property. I know we've had our differences over the years, but seeing your success makes me think about how proud Dad would be of all his children. I'm hoping we can find a way to come together as a family to honor his memory and maybe find ways to support each other through the challenges we're all facing." The message revealed Jennifer's continued inability to accept responsibility for the consequences of her choices. She framed her outreach as concern for family unity, while ignoring the reality that her actions had destroyed the trust necessary for genuine family relationships. Marcus's most recent message had arrived just before the 5th anniversary of their father's death, timed to coincide with news reports about the research center's opening ceremony.
Her approach had become even more direct in its financial focus, abandoning any pretense of seeking emotional reconciliation in favor of explicit requests for business partnerships and investment opportunities. "Sarah, I have an opportunity to acquire a distressed commercial property that could be renovated and developed into a profitable rental complex. The project requires more capital than I can access through traditional financing, but it could provide excellent returns for the right investor. Given your success with petroleum development, I thought you might be interested in diversifying into commercial real estate through a family partnership." Sarah recognized these communications as variations on the same themes that had characterized her siblings' behavior throughout their adult lives:
They remained focused on their own immediate needs and desires, unable or unwilling to consider how their actions affected others or to take responsibility for the consequences of their choices. Her responses to these messages remained polite, but clear about the boundaries she had established. She acknowledged their communications without encouraging further contact or suggesting any possibility of financial assistance or business partnerships. Marcus, I appreciate your interest in maintaining family communication, but I remain focused on the environmental and educational initiatives that reflect Dad's values and vision for responsible development. I hope you're able to find success in your business endeavors through your own efforts and planning. The measured tone of her responses reflected the emotional distance that had developed over the years since the inheritance challenge. Sarah had learned to protect herself from her siblings' manipulation while maintaining her own integrity and avoiding the kind of vindictive behavior that would have compromised her values. This approach had been validated by the advice of Dr. Margaret Stevens, a family counselor who specialized in inheritance disputes and sibling conflicts. Dr. Stevens had helped Sarah understand that maintaining boundaries with manipulative family members was not only appropriate, but necessary for psychological health and personal growth. Your siblings' behavior follows classic patterns of entitlement and manipulation that often emerge in inheritance situations, Dr. Stevens had explained during one of their sessions. Their inability to accept responsibility for their actions or to show genuine remorse indicates that reconciliation attempts are likely to be superficial and ultimately harmful to your well-being. Dr. Stevens' guidance had helped Sarah recognize that her desire to maintain family relationships was natural and healthy, but that genuine relationships required mutual respect and accountability that her siblings had proven incapable of providing. The counseling sessions had also helped Sarah process the grief associated with losing family relationships, allowing her to mourn the siblings she had hoped to have while accepting the reality of the siblings she actually had. This emotional work had been essential for moving forward with confidence and purpose rather than remaining trapped by guilt or false hope for reconciliation. As Sarah reflected on the 5 years since her father's death, she recognized that the inheritance challenge had actually served as a valuable revelation of her siblings' true character and values. Without the stress of unexpected wealth and legal conflict, she might never have fully understood the extent of their selfishness and willingness to engage in betrayal for personal gain. This understanding had freed her to focus on relationships and activities that aligned with her values and brought genuine satisfaction. The research center staff, scholarship recipients, and environmental partners had become a chosen family that shared her commitment to meaningful work and ethical behavior. The Petroleum Development Project had also introduced Sarah to Continental's leadership team, particularly Maria Santos, who had become both a trusted business partner and close personal
friend. Maria's expertise in sustainable development and her commitment to environmental responsibility had been instrumental in the project's success. Working with you has changed how I think about petroleum development, Maria had told Sarah during a recent planning meeting for the expansion of extraction operations. You've shown that landowners can be true partners in development rather than just passive recipients of royalty payments. This partnership approach had become a model for Continental's other development projects, with the company now seeking landowners who shared Sarah's commitment to environmental stewardship and long-term sustainability. The success of the Mitchell Tract project had demonstrated that responsible development practices could actually enhance profitability by reducing environmental compliance costs and building community support. Sarah's influence on Continental's corporate culture had extended beyond environmental practices to include community engagement and educational initiatives. The company now funded scholarship programs and research projects at multiple development sites, creating positive relationships with local communities that supported long-term business success. These broader impacts represented exactly the kind of legacy that Sarah believed her father would have valued. His decision to entrust her with the Mitchell Tract had not only created personal wealth and security, but had also generated positive changes that extended far beyond her individual circumstances. The 6th year of petroleum development brought an unexpected opportunity that would test Sarah's commitment to her father's values while potentially multiplying her wealth yet again. A major international petroleum corporation approached Continental with an offer to purchase the entire Mitchell Tract project for a sum that would have made Sarah one of the wealthiest individuals in the state.
The offer came from Pinnacle Energy International, a company known for aggressive extraction practices and minimal environmental protections. Their proposal included immediate payment of $75 million for all petroleum rights and surface property, along with guarantees of continued production revenue for Continental's technical team. Maria Santos presented the offer to Sarah with obvious reluctance, knowing that accepting it would mean abandoning the environmental protections and sustainable practices that had made the project a model for responsible development. The financial terms are extraordinary, Maria acknowledged during their discussion of Pinnacle's proposal, but I need you to understand that Pinnacle's standard practices are completely different from our approach. They prioritize maximum extraction speed over environmental protection, and they have a history of conflicts with local communities. Sarah studied the financial projections that accompanied Pinnacle's offer, recognizing that accepting it would provide immediate wealth that exceeded even her most optimistic long-term projections for continued development with Continental. The $75 million would be available immediately, eliminating any risk associated with fluctuating petroleum markets or technical challenges in future extraction operations. But the decision also represented a fundamental choice between her father's values and maximum financial gain. Accepting Pinnacle's offer would mean abandoning the research center, ending the environmental monitoring programs, and allowing the property to be developed without the protections that had made the project environmentally sustainable. Sarah requested time to consider the offer, using the interval to visit the research center and walk the property boundaries that she had explored with her father during childhood weekends. Standing in the restored wetland area where she had once collected mineral samples with him, she realized that the decision was actually quite simple. Her father had chosen to leave her the property specifically because he trusted her to make decisions that balance
Economic opportunity with environmental responsibility. Selling to Pinnacle would represent a betrayal of that trust and an abandonment of the values that had guided every decision since she inherited the land. Sarah's response to Pinnacle's offer was delivered through Maria Santos and Continental's legal team, declining the purchase proposal while reaffirming her commitment to continued sustainable development with Continental as her partner. The Mitchell Tract represents more than a petroleum extraction opportunity, Sarah's written response stated. It is a demonstration that economic development can enhance environmental value when guided by appropriate scientific understanding and long-term commitment to stewardship. That mission cannot be accomplished through the kind of intensive extraction practices that characterize Pinnacle's approach to development. The decision to decline Pinnacle's offer earned additional recognition from environmental organizations and sustainable development advocates, further establishing Sarah's reputation as a leader in responsible resource management. The choice also demonstrated that her commitment to her father's values was genuine rather than simply convenient when it aligned with financial incentives. News of Sarah's decision reached Marcus and Jennifer through media coverage of Pinnacle's failed acquisition attempt. Both siblings contacted Sarah immediately, their messages revealing profound frustration with what they perceived as her irresponsible rejection of maximum financial gain. Marcus's response was particularly revealing of his continued inability to understand Sarah's motivations and values. "Sarah, I can't believe you turned down $75 million for some environmental nonsense. Do you have any idea what that money could have meant for our family? You could have solved everyone's financial problems and still had more wealth than you could spend in a lifetime." Jennifer's message focused on missed opportunities and family obligations, framing Sarah's decision as selfishness disguised as environmental responsibility. "I don't understand how you can choose trees and wildlife over family security. That $75 million could have set up college funds for the next generation, helped Marcus save his business, and given me the capital to rebuild my real estate career. Instead, you're keeping it tied up in some research project that benefits strangers more than your own siblings." These responses confirmed for Sarah that her siblings still viewed the petroleum development primarily as a source of wealth that should be shared among family members, rather than as a responsibility that required careful stewardship. Their continued focus on their own financial needs, rather than the broader impacts of development decisions, validated her choice to maintain distance from their influence.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.